Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
President's Day 2020, his favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt. That's because of the state park system he set up and many other things. Teddy Roosevelt, a very accomplished president. Glad to have with us today Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Sheriff Jim Allard, want to get right to it. Bail reform. What is this based on, this idea that all criminals are completely innocent and the police are framing everybody? What is it the left in New York City thinks here?
Criminals are all innocent, that they're not committing crimes, that they're all just innocently waiting for their case to be heard. And we know that there's a segment of the population that are predators. They are predators on the vulnerable, the weak, and unfortunately, that's what happens with human beings. So we're ignoring that segment of the population and creating laws which isolate police, isolate the district attorney, and do everything they can to render them unable to do their basic job, which is keep the public safe. And as we move forward, we were at a balanced place before. There were checks and balances on everything that law enforcement did, everything that the prosecutor did. And they removed all the balance and only left the checks in place. So as we continue to do actual reform, not just dismantle the criminal justice system, I think it's important that everybody sits down and talks and there were some areas that could be fine-tuned. But by and large, the system was working very well. And now it's completely and recklessly dysfunctional. When they talk about data, we haven't seen enough data yet to support this. Those are real people that are being injured, real people that are having property stolen, real people that are losing their lives. That's not data. That's an effect on the society of the citizens of the state of New York, wherein they've lost their ability to be safe in their home, on the roadway, and in the subways. So let's get away from the hyperbole of data and let's talk about what we're really causing here, which is harm to society.
Talking to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard, the green light law. That's been in the news a lot lately because Governor Andrew Cuomo's been meeting with President Donald Trump on that. Of course, Congressman Tom Reed weighed in weeks ago warning that Homeland Security was not going to be taking any more people into the Trusted Traveler programs, which basically, summed up quickly, makes it so you can get through the airport TSA lines faster. Governor Andrew Cuomo, very annoyed at that. He's working with President Donald Trump on that. Your thoughts on the green light law, Sheriff Jim Allard?
So again, this is another law that affects law enforcement greatly. Also, so basically, any person can go in with any one of four. I think it's 200 and some types of identification or documentation to get a New York State license, regardless of whether you're legally here or not. We as law enforcement agency heads, for example, sheriffs, chiefs of police, we had to sign a document with the state. We had to enter into contract with the state of New York guaranteeing that we would not release photos from DMV to any federal government officials in order to still be able to access those for our investigations. So we had to sign a document with the state if we wanted to be able to access that data, saying that we wouldn't share it with the FBI, ICE, Border Patrol, any one of those agencies, the DEA, any one of those agencies who could be working with us as partners to be safe. We're unable to use that information in conjunction with those investigations in order to be able to still access them as a New York State law enforcement agency. I just don't know how that's in keeping with an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. But that is what we had to do in order to be able to continue to utilize that data in our investigations. As we see that across the state, obviously that's going to have huge effects for our border counties that border with Canada. Sheriff Jeff Murphy, who's the president of the New York State Sheriff's Association, did an excellent interview about that on Fox and Friends the other day. And again, all we're looking for is balance. All we're looking for is the ability to do our jobs and still protect the rights and the citizens of the state of New York. That seems to be lost here yet again.
It seems that, the far left out of New York City is passing laws that I would say not only don't work in upstate, but are very unpopular in upstate. And especially for New York City, I would think it would be a few safety issues. What are your thoughts there, Sheriff?
Tremendous safety issues. When you look at one of the largest cities in the world with two major airports that supply people and goods to that area, and now you have an inability to work with your federal partners to protect your city. I mean, we only have to look as far as 9/11 or 9/11 to look at what happens when we have that breakdown in communication between state and federal partners. And, I think that the citizens of New York City have to be especially concerned with the fact that state agencies and local agencies are unable to work with their federal partners on immigration issues when we see all of the threats coming out of Iran and from the various terrorist organizations in the Middle East. And now we're saying, well, we're gonna try to deal with this with one hand tied behind our back. But that's because we want to be a sanctuary city. We're a sanctuary.
And I think that Congressman Tom Reed has said that he's going to be speaking with the acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf on this. Wondering, Sheriff, of all the people you've spoken with, have you talked with Congressman Tom Reed on any of these issues, bail reform or the green light law?
I have talked to Congressman Reed about bail reform, and it's funny because even Congressman Reed, started his career as a defense attorney in Corning, and even he says this is wrong, this is a mistake, this makes us less safe, this is the wrong route to take. And, anybody who has any sense whatsoever of the criminal justice system knows that it's wrong. What it is a failed experiment by the extreme left pandering to special interest groups. And now the rest of the law-abiding citizens of the state of New York have to pay the penalty. And that's just ridiculous. There's no data out there. When they talk about data, there's nothing to support this radical move. There's nothing to show that it would work because nobody else does it as radically as what we're doing right now. And we're the experiment. We're the place where the tests are occurring on a daily basis. And again, I can't overemphasize enough when they talk about data, talking about people, talking about people's lives. They're talking about their homes. They're talking about injuries that are occurring to them. When you take someone for domestic violence and arrest them after they've beaten their spouse, knowing full well that in an hour they're going to be back there, it takes away our ability to keep people safe, help them make a safety plan, help them keep themselves safe. And I also wonder how many people are not calling now, are not reporting domestic violence because they know that offender is going to be back in an hour.
And it would be a threatening situation for the victim in that situation. That's a very interesting point, Sheriff. We're going to take a quick break, check the forecast. We'll be back in just a moment with Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Stay with us.
Courts Auto Collision.
Hi, Bill.
Never seen an insurance job we both can't make money on yet.
Bill?
And yes, I still have a free loaner car.
Bill, I just called to...
Courts Auto Collision, State Route 36, south of Canisteel, 698-9900. Online at McCourtsCollision.com.
Bill, for the first time in my life, you have left me speechless.
I am Bill McCourt.
Wow.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carolyn. Hey, Rob, how much of the winter is left on this Monday, February 17th?
Well, if you do the calculations based upon when meteorological winter ends and Gary's best spring day occurs, that would only be 12 days from now, Brian. March 1st is considered the start meteorologically of spring. Weather-wise, we usually go a little bit longer than that here in the Northeast. I'd say probably by late March, we should be done with the winter weather. Right now, it looks like we're going to continue this kind of seesaw pattern of briefly warming up and then turning cold, briefly warming up and turning cold. The real big story this winter is the cold has been unable to hang around for any great length of time, and I think that's going to continue for probably the next 4 or 5 weeks. Brian, we've got some cloudiness out there this morning, but it should break up enough that we get to see some sunshine. Temperatures will be up to about 35 to 40 this afternoon. We have a weak wave of low pressure headed our way for tonight. Lows, they're going to drop down to about 30, and we'll see some light snow develop probably after midnight. It'll also become breezy. Now, for tomorrow, looks like we're going to be cloudy and breezy. Any snow will change to sleet and then rain tomorrow morning. It'll end as rain tomorrow afternoon. Highs will be somewhere between 45 and 50. Tomorrow night, lots of leftover clouds, temperatures near 25. We'll have cloudiness during the day on Wednesday. There could be a few flurries or snow showers with 25 to 30. And it looks like the cold weather will continue Thursday and Friday. Brian, sunrise on this President's Day was at 7:04 this morning. It'll set tonight at 5:44.
Thank you, Rob. Back to Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. Sheriff, I want to ask you a question on the drug law situation. You take the old 1970s Rockefeller drug laws versus what they're doing today here in 2020. The latest is they want to legalize marijuana, and many wonder, will there be other drugs legalized after marijuana is? Your thoughts on the way it used to be with the Rockefeller drug laws, which were considered very strict, versus what they're doing today, Sheriff Allard?
Well, the Rockefeller drug laws were primarily based in the length of sentencing, and some would call them draconian. They were a response at the time to try and get a handle on drug sales within the state of New York. It's no secret that the majority of crime within the state of New York is driven by addiction, either folks stealing to support that addiction or crimes associated with the illicit selling of narcotics. So when you look at that, that was the response, and at the time it was appropriate, and it's changed since then. Very few of the Rockefeller, if any, of the Rockefeller sentencing guidelines are still in place. They've all been peeled back or repealed and reestablished with lighter sentences. One thing that I do agree with 100% is more drug courts, more treatment, finding ways to treat these folks and help them get into recovery from addiction rather than just punish them for their addiction. And I think we've been very invested in this area with that for quite some time now. As we move forward in the legalization of marijuana, again, it's not recreational marijuana, it's the commercialization of marijuana. The governor and the leadership in the Senate and the Assembly see this as a cash cow. They see this as an ability to bring in billions of dollars in state taxes, and in true form, what we've seen over the last few years, continue to push the payment for all of the social ills associated with it down to the counties. When you look at other states that have legalized marijuana, and you look at homelessness, you look at health care costs, you look at all of the things that society has to pay for, that's all paid for by the counties. So I think their push is, again, to try and load the state coffers with no funding or no plan for the counties to deal with it. And as we've seen in raise the age, bail reform, centralized arraignment court, there's no funds coming from the state for these mandates. They simply shove it down to the counties and say, figure it out and pay for it. And that's what we end up doing. So whether you're pro-marijuana, anti-marijuana, it's still going to cost you a lot of money out of your pocket if they move forward with this. Now, on the addiction end, I think it's a horrible idea. On the public health end, I think it's a horrible idea. When you look at the number of cases of vaping death associated to use of cannabis oil with the vaping, I think it's 80% is where they're at now. That should tell you something. That should tell you something. It's not the harmless weed that people are led to believe.
Sheriff, last week we did a story on how Hornell Police Chief Ted Murray said 5 lives were saved recently by Hornell Police with Narcan, reversing near fatal overdoses. Police Chief Murray also says in Hornell these days there's seems to be an increase of fentanyl use, and that fentanyl is getting mixed with methamphetamines, not just heroin. Your thoughts on those stats from Police Chief Murray?
Yeah, I saw that article that he had in the Tribune. It was an excellent article. Chief Murray did a very good job with that, I thought. We're seeing the same thing. Countywide, we're seeing batching, as they call it, where they're mixing different drugs together to prolong the high, to make it less expensive, to do all kinds of things. Again, if we open the door and say that addiction is okay and that the drug use is okay, then we're going to see an increase in illegal sales. We're going to see an increase in our overdoses. Again, we were starting to make progress on the overdose scene against the opioids especially, and we were seeing progress in Steuben County, at least, with all the different programs we were doing. This would negate all of those, and we would go right back to square one again.
And, sorry to hear that, Sheriff. By the way, on going back to bail reform, this whole business of reports that we see out of places like New York City this morning, suspects taunting police saying, we're just going to have to be released, new laws, these new laws are great, the bail reform laws the suspects are talking about. Have there been any cases with the Steuben County Sheriff's Department where suspects have taunted deputies?
I don't know if there's been taunting, but everyone's aware. They all know they're going to get released. And like I say, when we look at folks that have been released 2 and 3 times within 48 hours to go on and continue to commit crimes, they know exactly what's going on. And as we move forward, unless we change this back, unless we make an effective change to bring balance back into place, we're going to continue to see this mad rush towards a cliff of anarchy. That's what I see coming out of the leadership in our state government, as we're in such a hurry to be the first that we're throwing caution to the wind, and we're moving towards true anarchy in that if there is no consequence for our actions, no responsibility for what we do, then we're going to continue to see this rise in crime. And all these cases are still going to have to be adjudicated at some point, which is going to clog the courts and clog not only the prosecutor's office, but also the public defender's office. They were at committee last week, the public defender and the conflict defender, saying we need more people. We can't keep up with the discovery laws on the defense side. So it's made things more cumbersome, more crimes being occurred, more difficult for both sides to adjudicate it, and these folks are going to end up with longer sentences because of the multiple offenses. The idea to get people out of jail is going to backfire. It's just incredibly reckless and irresponsible what we're seeing.
Sheriff, with that, we have to go, but I want to thank you very much for joining us here on this President's Day 2020.
Happy President's Day. Hey, and before you go, I would be remiss if I didn't say the 20th we'll have our next batch of EMTs graduating, and that'll bring 28 EMTs to the citizens of Steuben County service that were not there before.
That's great news. Thank you for joining us, Sheriff.
Yeah, anytime.